"I think you're just perfect," she murmured, seconds away from plunging her teeth into my shoulder blade. I've never had much luck with love. Not for lack of interest, mind you. I always wanted a family of my own. I just don't think the good Lord created me with romance at the forefront of their blueprint. Though me on a date is like taking a sedan off-roading. Sure, it can be done, but it ain't graceful. Nor is it really the point of that particular vehicle, and most people don't elect to give it a second try after the first. They lease out a Jeep instead. A large part of it comes down to attraction. Simply put, I don't think I'm the most desirable bachelor. I'm bulky, not obese per se, but I'm not exactly chiseled either, closer to Dionysus than Adonis in terms of body frame. Not only that, but I'm not much of a conversationalist. Even if I was born with a silver tongue, I wouldn't have much to speak about. Never had much fascination with pop culture music or cinema, topics that most folk are well versed in, that can help break the ice. No, my singular hobby has always been decidedly devoid of any and all sex appeal, at least in my experience. Woodworking. What can I say? There's just a certain satisfaction in handiwork that has always appealed to me. Not only that, but the act of creation can be meditative like prayer. But unlike prayer, something actually comes of it. In the end, I suppose I appreciate the pursuit because it makes me feel useful, which is the best segue I can come up with to introduce Bella, the woman who sunk her canines into my back on the subway 3 weeks ago. To be clear, I don't know what her actual name is. The police don't either, for that matter. In the months that led up to the assault, however, I'd started thinking of her as Bella. I was much too bashful to ask her real name, nor do I think it's any man's place to bother a young lady with unsolicited personal inquiries. But we interacted frequently enough, where there's that beautiful Italian woman. Again, felt a little impersonal, even if I was only saying it in my head. It's pathetic. I know I will point out that the name wasn't chosen on a whim. Bella seemed to capture her essence quite well, both the beauty of her person and the tragedy of her existence. She was always wheezing. Her lungs squeaked and huffed like a decade-old chewed-up dog toy. No matter what she was doing, even when she was still, she'd wheeze. Bella was discreet about it, and she never seemed to be in distress, but I didn't like the public's indifference to her plight, regardless of her apparent control and stability. Just because an amputee seems adept with their crutches doesn't mean you don't look to help them where you can. Saw her for the first time 9 months ago. I stepped onto the metro to find that the seats were filled somehow, leaving Bella as the only one standing, audibly rasping while leaning her body against a pole. The seats weren't even completely occupied by people either. A small, middle-aged man in a cheap suit was overflowing into both of his adjacent spaces, one seat for his tablet, another for the remains of his breakfast sandwich. I'm not usually one to stick my neck where it doesn't belong, but that didn't sit right with me. After some gentle cajoling on my part, the man relented and cleaned up his trash so Bella could sit. I could tell he was livid, but he didn't argue either, probably on account of the size difference between me and him. While it was true that I've probably taken shits that weighed more than that man on multiple occasions, I wouldn't ever have hurt him. He didn't know that, though he likely interpreted my quiet disposition as a sign that I could be dangerous. Things that are actually dangerous don't need to be showy about it. As Bella sat down, her wheezing slowed. She thanked me, and I could see in her warm brown eyes that she was happy to be off her feet. I smiled, nodded my head, and that was it. Didn't try to talk to her, didn't stare. As gorgeous as she was, I considered our business concluded when I departed the train at my stop about 10 minutes later. I happened to notice that those warm brown eyes were following me off as well. Surprise at her ongoing interest blushed my face the color of a maraschino cherry. No doubt. Can't imagine that was very becoming of me either. It's one thing when a handsome Casanova type blushes. The brightness just adds definition to their already perfect contours. Me, though, just doesn't look right. No one wants to see Mr. Hyde blush. Still, I'd be lying if I pretended like it didn't pleasantly flutter my heart. From that day on, Bella was already there. When I hopped on the train for work, picked up her things when she dropped them, out of reach a few times, helped her up when she tripped and fell once. We never talked though, and I was perfectly content with that. I had no illusions about my position in the hierarchy, nor did I let myself fantasize like some sort of love-drunk teenager. Nothing wrong with that when you're actually a teenager, but I haven't been one of those in quite a long while. Like with my woodworking, I was just happy to feel useful. When the opportunity arose, at least Bella perceived this desire in me too. Apparently, I was exactly what she had been searching for. The pain was unreal, but somehow the shock of it all was even worse. I didn't even hear Bella approach until she was practically wheezing into my ear. "I think you're just perfect." She murmured words accented by the sharp hisses coming from her throat, like she had swallowed a live cobra. Before I could even begin to process that statement, an explosive pain detonated in my shoulder blade. It felt like thousands of serrated pins swirling aimlessly through my flesh, eviscerating my brittle nerves until they were barely intact enough to cry out anymore. Honestly, I thought someone had shot me. I threw my hand around my back, looking to access the injury with my fingertips. There was something in the way, however. Whatever it was, the force of my movement broke through it, with hardly any resistance, and my hand kept going until it crashed into something hot, sturdy and pulsating. There was a muffled whimper, vocalizations vibrating uncomfortably against my back, and the pain lessened. When I spun around, my mind struggled to comprehend what I saw. Bella smiling at me, revealing a mouth full of peg-shaped, overcrowded teeth that dripped with freshly liberated blood. I recall there were rows and rows of chalky white fangs that seemed to go on forever, deeper and deeper into her gullet. Or at least I couldn't see where they stopped. Hundreds of those grotesque molars had bitten straight through my jacket and undershirt. As if that wasn't enough, there was also a massive cavity in the right side of her chest where my hand had connected. It was almost like Bella was ribless, as my fingers had cleanly cut through her torso until it collided with some midline structure, tucking the fabric of her wispy sundress into the new crease in a way that made me instantly nauseous. I'm strong, but I certainly wasn't capable of caving in a woman's chest without even trying. At that point, another passenger was closing in behind Bella, arms outstretched to apprehend the maniac woman. With a motion that would have bordered on elegance if it wasn't so starkly terrifying, she twisted her upper body and extended her spine, placing her palms onto the floor between the passenger's legs. Her nails clawed at the metal, screeching as she skittered under the man on all fours without colliding into him. Before anyone else could react, Bella had slithered through the closing subway doors, barely clearing the narrow threshold before it shut completely. And with that, she was gone. The train jerked and then began chugging forward. I glimpsed Bella through the window as we gained speed, crawling up the stairs still on all fours. In a state of silent disorientation, I slowly sat down on the floor, closed my eyes, lowered my head into my hands and receded into myself. Even then, I could tell that the pain was changing. The stabbing sensation waned. It was gradually being replaced by a feeling that was agonizing in a different, less physical way. My wound tickled, writhed, and twitched. "So do you know who she is?" Was she stalking me or something? I asked the detective over the phone 2 days after the incident. Well, no. He paused, clicking his tongue. Not in the legal sense, no. She was clearly very, entranced with you. Absurdly, he said nothing further. Like that was a satisfactory answer to my question. I apologize, sir, but could you kindly elaborate on what that means? Another few clicks of his tongue, a handful of false starts with ers that trailed off to nowhere, and then a minute later, he finally expanded on the notion of Bella being entranced with me. While I waited for the man to conjure some sort of explanation, I sifted through the day's mail. Right before he started speaking, my eyes landed on a weathered envelope at the bottom of the pile. No return address, no stamp, didn't even have my name on it. In raggedy, childlike handwriting, it simply read, "For the nice man on the train, the woman who bit you sat on the subway for about 18 hours every day without fail. Didn't eat, didn't drink. For the last 90 days, she did. At least Transportation Authority doesn't hold CCTV footage for longer than 3 months." He said my heart thundered wildly against my sternum as I pulled the crumpled message out of its envelope. She didn't move much, would just kind of gaze out the window most of the day. But whenever you were on the train, she watched you like a hawk. I hung up, couldn't hear any more. It was too much all at one time. My eyes scanned the note. 20 letters, 5 words. Didn't make a lick of sense once Mother come find me. A week off of work helped at first, kept my mind occupied with household chores. Moreover, I didn't have to grapple with the possibility of encountering Bella on the train. A myriad of overlapping fangs jutting through her smile, like stalactites on the roof of a cave home, just felt safer. There was an undeniable irrationality to that impression, though. She had been at my house recently too. The letter had clearly been hand-delivered. I ignored that inconsistency and immersed myself in the overdue handiwork. Cleaned out the gutters, took a bus out to the nearest Home Depot to pick up some wasp spray for a new hive growing out of an open pipe in my basement, attended to my vegetable garden. All the while, the lump on my shoulder blade continued to grow. It wasn't much at first, just a marble-sized blister on the very tip of my scapula. If you examined it at just the right angle, the growth looked like it was the exact center of a circle established by the clusters of raw, peg-shaped bite marks surrounding it. When it tripled in size overnight, I practically sprinted to the urgent care, which was only a few blocks away. The doctor didn't seem too impressed by the lesion, which was a relief. That said, never in my life have I interacted with a healthcare professional that looked more dead behind the eyes. Through a series of grumbles, they informed me it was likely a bacterial abscess from the bite. But it was nothing a 10-day course of antibiotics couldn't remedy. Of course, the medicine didn't do jack shit. How could it? It wasn't even targeting the type of thing that was germinating in that makeshift womb. By the end of the week, it felt as though a tangerine had been surgically implanted underneath my skin. Not only that, but I began experiencing other symptoms as well. My entire body felt swollen and heavy, like buckets of dense salt water were sloshing around in my tissue with every movement. A dry, hacking cough took hold of me every few minutes. Despite getting nearly double my normal amount of sleep, I woke up every day groggy and debilitated by an unyielding malaise. Wanted it to be the flu. At least I wanted to convince myself that I was coming down with influenza. The alternative was far worse. A ticking metronome expanding under my shoulder blade made that illusion basically impossible to maintain, though. My symptoms and the growth were clearly connected. There wasn't really pain around the bite anymore. Or if there was a more unexplainable feeling, drowned it out. By then, The twitching, writhing sensation had become much louder and unsettlingly rhythmic. A swarm of microscopic firecrackers imploding inside the confines of that cyst every 5 seconds like clockwork. It was much worse at night, but a double dose of my before-bed sleep aid brought unconsciousness deep enough to afford me brief respite from the sensation, until one evening when I could ignore it no longer. The sun had just started to crest under the horizon, casting curtains of dim light into my home. The decaying shadows of an unlit room embraced by a withering twilight. I was pacing furiously around my first floor at my wit's end, with the sensation and contemplating what to do next, shirt off, since the roughness of my flannel had been irritating the growth. At the same time, I was attempting to keep a simmering panic attack from completely taking over. No matter which way I looked at the situation, though my mind kept arriving at the same answer, might be time for the hospital. When I finally accepted, that was the only reasonable course of action. It had become too dark to see, and I felt liable to trip over furniture as I gathered my coat and wallet. Cautiously, I found my way to a lamp and flicked it on. The presence of something unexpected on the armrest of my couch, in synergy with my frenzied state, startled me to high heaven, causing my heart to leap into my throat. A paper wasp was buzzing quietly over the upholstery. Now, under normal circumstances, I'm not a hot-tempered person, but at that moment, I wasn't quite myself. A volatile mixture of sleep deprivation, panic and fear coursed through my veins. In truth, I was a Molotov cocktail anxiously waiting for the match, primed and ready to burn. The spark of adrenaline that came with being surprised was enough to ignite the dormant rage inside me. I stomped over to the hallway closet, swung the door open with such force that his doorknob dented the adjacent wall as it slammed against the plaster, and grabbed my heaviest work boots by the pull strap. At that point, the wasp had meandered over to the surface of my coffee table, calm and wholly unaware of its imminent demise. Wide-eyed and boiling, I ran towards the creature and brought the heel down on its fragile body like an executioner. A sickening chitinous crunch radiated up my arm. As it did, my rage seemingly vanished, dissipated instantly like the details of a dream quickly drifting away after waking. In the absence of anger, I felt a terrible, heart-wrenching regret, a profound sadness that I had absolutely no explanation for. When my eye glimpsed movement on my back in a nearby mirror, though I began to understand, a gradual, tortuous realization that defied explanation. In stunned horror, I watched a pair of tiny, wriggling thorns sprout from the flesh of my growth, twitching, writhing. After extending about a half-inch above the surface, they ripped my skin open, creating a hole just large enough to reveal the insect they were attached to. It struggled to emerge. The natural tension of my epidermis valiantly fought back against its birth. Eventually, though it all came through, head, thorax, wings, abdomen, stinger. A paper wasp, almost identical to the one I had just mangled, had crawled out from the massive cyst. As it flew away, my skin snapped shut. Then it appeared smooth and perfectly sealed, like nothing had crawled out of it in the first place. Numbed to the point of utter indifference, I was just glad the process didn't hurt. No pain at all, actually. Just the twitching and the writhing and the tickling. When I dragged my eyes from the mirror and back to the boot lingering upright on the table like a tombstone, I came to terms with the origin of my regret. In a sense, I had crushed my child. If you can believe it, the following few days were even more taxing on my body. It started with an all too familiar noise spilling from lips. The sound reminded me of her, and for whatever reason, the thought of her didn't inspire as much terror in my stomach as it had in the days that lead up to that moment. Like Bella, I was wheezing, As I ran my fingertips down the side of my chest, the reason became clear. A few centimeters below my nipple, the skin, muscle, and bone were incrementally caving in on both the left and right side of my torso. It took about 24 hours for the process to be completed, but once the tissue had collapsed down to the edges of my spine, I imagine a generous portion of my lungs were being compressed in turn, a byproduct of my devolution. And although I comprehended what was causing me to wheeze, I didn't understand why it was happening. But as I surveyed the paper-like nests that were rapidly springing up in every corner of my home, their inhabitants revealed the answer. I was changing to look like my progeny, and reciprocally, my progeny was starting to look a little like me. They were larger than normal wasps, most coaster-sized or bigger. Some had splotches of human skin in places, as opposed to their usual yellow-brown carapace. Their legs were wider, almost the width of a pinky finger, and a few even had knuckles and fingernails. One of them retained their compound eyes, but all of them were human instead of insectoid. A kaleidoscopic array of hazel irises listlessly staring into the ether. As for me, I was developing the demarcation between my thorax and my abdomen to match my progeny. The scientific term for it, according to Google, is a petiole. Honestly, though I prefer the slang version of that, a wasp waist. Initially, the separation was painful. The parts above my petiole lacked a sturdy foundation, twisting and straining the overworked muscles as I attempted to keep myself aligned properly. Thankfully, my progeny were grateful for their home, and they showed their gratitude by creating architecture to support my change. Without instruction, they flew into those gaps and erected beams made of chewed wood fiber, filling in the empty space between my new upper and lower body. It certainly wasn't perfect, but it worked. Must have been what I accidentally punched through that day, I thought. And that realization eventually brought my mind back to the cryptic letter. Once mother come find me, how will I know where to find Bella? Certainly can't step on the train looking like this again. My progeny provided, like a watermark on a photograph or the barcode on a bag of chips. Each and every hive was built to have faint text imprinted on the outside of it. No additional message, just an address of somewhere not too far from me. Right now, I'm waiting for night to fall. Under the cover of darkness, I plan on traveling to that address to meet Bella. I expect it will be a one-way trip though, so I've spent the day typing this up. Consider this post my last will and testament, which in the end boils down to a singular request. Do not disturb my home. I'm leaving it to my progeny. The sun has set completely. Truthfully, I'm petrified, and I wish things were different. Cameron, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I didn't call you. Tell Mum, I'm sorry as well. Know that although I'm resigned to this fate, there is a glimmer of beauty in it for me. I'll be with Bella, and I think I'll be useful too.